So, experts. You're all going to be experts in impact management, measurement and management in 2.5 hours, okay? That's right. So I've crammed quite a lot into the agenda today. In fact, we normally do this over about 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, but Margaret tells me you're a quick learning bunch, and I've read all your bios, pretty inspired / intimidated by you all, so I think we can get through it. I'll also, disclaimer, say that there is quite a lot on these slides. So I don't expect you to read everything. I will share them with you, and I wanted them to be a bit of a resource that made sense and that you could take away. Okay, so there is a fair bit on there. Any other disclaimers? Let me just think. That's right. This is the start, and I'm going to use that cheesy word of a journey. Everyone has to sort of improve on that impact measurement and management, and I will be here, as Margaret says, further on to help you on your journeys. So we're going to start off before lunch, mainly with this first bullet point here, which is impact data for everyone. What does that mean? Because there's a lot of people in this ecosystem. There's investors, there's people like yourselves who are entrepreneurs, there's people who are on boards, and everyone wants information about impact. So we're really going to basically unpick that, first of all, just so we're clear on what type of information we're talking about. I'll touch on theory of change, but I really don't want to go into too much detail on that, because I believe you've been doing that on the agenda as well. So it's worth referencing. And then after lunch, we're going to do a real deep dive into what type of data you can be collecting from tomorrow. You know, you can go away tomorrow and already start using data. That'll be qualitative and quantitative. And then we'll talk about how we can analyze that. I've got some real data. Well, it's actually fake, but it's data for you to play around with. And it's all about analyzing that, and we can look at next steps, okay? So there's going to be points exercises where we're actually using this fake case study. It would be too difficult for everyone to use their own individual project. But as you're going through the exercises, I'm sure you can kind of think, how would this work in my context? Is that okay? I'll just briefly explain that Social Value UK are a national network for social value. We work across all sectors, so we've got public sector, private sector, and social entrepreneurs all coming together to kind of look at what is social value, social impact, how can we get better at it? And we do training, events, guidance, and assurance. It's worth saying that we're actually part of an international movement, so there's an international charity called Social Value International, and we have 23 countries with national networks, all converging over a set of principles and an approach to measuring and managing impact. So wherever you are in the world, I believe a lot of you have flown in. If you want to sort of see if we've got a community of people that you can join, do let me know. We're a network of networks, if you like, but we're kind of brought together because we're aiming for the big stuff: reducing inequality, environmental degradation, and improving well-being. Those are the three things that we're aiming for, and we believe we can do that by changing the way the world accounts for value. So at the moment, the world looks at value very much looking at financial value. We know how to do that. 400 years we've been measuring financial value with accountancy, but all of our decisions based on money and cost is meaning that we're getting more inequality, less well-being. So we're just trying to say, well, value, let's say there's financial value, but also social and environmental, and that's what brings us all together as a network of networks. We do methodology, we do training and assurance, and we're very much a bottoms up. That's not what I'm going to say. Bottom up approach. So we're, practitioners should be leading the development of the method. It's not me or my team sat in a room going, this is how we do it. We've got loads of committees of fantastic, intelligent people all across the world, volunteering in many instances to give their expertise to progress this. Because it's worth saying, this is an emerging field, right? Accounting for value is new. As I say, we know about financial value, but measuring and accounting for this non-financial value is new. We're all kind of learning on this. So it's a journey that we're all on. Okay. So the objectives for today is we're going to shift actually from the starting position of how much impact have I made to how can I make as much impact as I can with the resources I've got. So it's less about measuring and proving this is how good we are and this is the amount. It's more about how can I make sure that I can create as much impact as I can. And that's a really important starting point, okay? So I want everyone when they've left the room today to be like, I don't care about an amount of impact. It's what data do I need to make sure that I can create more with the resources we've got. We've all got limited resources. And that means looking at data, culture, and systems that you might need within your organization. It's less about one fancy report, one glossy, shiny impact report. It's more about what you've got within your organization that sets you up for collecting the right information. It's not about a tool. That's the important thing. This is an accountability framework. So the measurement and the management thing is there to make you accountable, to increase the accountability of your organization to the people you're there to serve. Okay, that is the main purpose of having this measurement and management approach. And accountability framework goes hand in hand with continuous improvement. We've always got to be improving. I know that you're all already doing that. Every day you wake up, you're going, how can I improve what I'm doing? But it's about putting that together in a systematic way. Okay, so we're going to go into session 1, which is impact data for everyone. And here we're going to look at, as I said, the different roles that exist and different types of information and decisions that are made. So we've got investors, we've got people on the boards, we've got entrepreneurs like you, and we've got beneficiaries. And there's different information that perhaps we all need. Before we do that, first question, what is social impact? We should probably get that sorted before we go any further. There's no trick question really. I just wanted to say quite simply, we're just talking about changes. Everyone was terrified then. Yeah, it's perhaps too obvious a question, but I think to establish, we're just talking about social impact being just changes in people's lives, and then we'll get to the value bit as well, because that's kind of building on that. We all experience changes in our life. Some of those changes lead to changes in well-being, and that's what we're talking about here, how we can change people's lives. So we're going to work on a case study for today. As I said, it's not a real one, but I made it up, employability. You see what I've done there? Yeah, yeah, it's great. Sorry. You can kick me out soon. But it is a social enterprise, and it works with unemployed people, marginalised from the labour market, helping them get skills. They run a 12-week program, helping these job seekers create CVs, apply for jobs, improve their communication skills, interviews, etc. So this project is given €200,000 from an impact investor to deliver the program for 3 years. Now the investor wants a financial return, but also some impact, and they want it aligned to the global goals for sustainable development, 1, 8, and 11. Yeah? Pretty standard. Okay, so this is the case study we're going to work on. Got you on 4 tables for a reason. We're going to do a bit of a role play. Does everyone like doing role play? Yeah, acting, get into the zone. Okay, so we're all in role. Get your methods, acting, heads on. Okay, yeah, the investor. Why am I doing this? Because the investor perspective. I know none of you are investors. But it's really important with this exercise that we get into the heads of investors to understand why they're asking you for all this weird information, okay? Because we've all been in that situation where you've got a funder, investor, and they're asking you to report X and Y, and you're scratching your head. What's that all about? So this is hopefully going to be helpful to you. And then also, do any of you have like multiple projects?
Yes.
Yeah, so that kind of thinking as well. It's kind of, if you're trying to aggregate impact and summarize impact of lots. That's the kind of mindset that the investor's in. So I'm going to give you 12 minutes, I think, to do this task. I'm going to get some flip chart paper, and I want you to think about the key questions you want to ask to know that the impact is being managed. Maybe we'll go around the room and just see what you got. So can I come to my favourite investors with all the money sat on the suitcases full of cash? What sort of questions did you come up with if you wanted to manage this investment?
You've been running the program for a year now. What has excited you the most about the work that you do?
That's the first. That's
No, I'm talking to the director.
so they're the beneficiaries. They're the board, and they're the staff.
Usually the investors, they talk to the CEO. So whoever is the CEO.
CEO's over here. Yeah. Well, there's only 3 of you, so one of you is the CEO, okay?
So you might have invited a board member in if you're intimidated, but Yeah.
Okay, so stick to the questions you've got there.
Yeah, I'm waiting for an answer. What has excited you the most in a year of being in operation?
No, I didn't want them to answer it, but just give us the type of questions that you came up with. Okay, that would be a great role play exercise. But in real life, investors, that's not the first question an investor would ask, is it?
The investors are changing.
And you're not a typical investor, I know, but generally, what type of questions have you got on that piece of paper?
Okay. How is the program contributing to the 3 global goals?
Yeah.
What's the status of the current financial returns?
Yeah.
Are you on schedule with the 3% financial returns we're expecting in a couple of months, weeks? What have you learned so far from operating the program? And what's your plan to allocate the given resources, whether you're behind or ahead of schedule? And what is your plan to mitigate the financial and social risk arising from being in operation?
Okay, great. These seem pretty standard investor type questions. Number of people, how does it align to the goals, financial status updates? Do you want that financial account audited, Ashok? Yeah.
Oh, for hell, yeah.
Yeah, so they want that. Do you want the social impact audited?
Sure.
It's just, well, there is, and that I kind of provoke that because normally people say, yes, I want the finances audit, I want to know that that's important. Social, no.
And we'll pay for it separately.
Right. You want to work with this investor then, because there's not many that will pay for that. But so that's good. Good investors, I like it. Over to the board of trustees.
What is the conversion rate? So how are we going to measure when people come into us, how many people actually become employed?
Okay, so it's
How many
these.
people
Yeah.
actually become employed out of our program? Is our program actually making people employable? So we need to understand how are we defining decent work and poverty so that we know how to measure those things. So what type of work is decent work and how many of our people are transferring out of our 12-week program and getting that type of work.
Right.
And how is that impacting their poverty level? But how do we define and measure their poverty level? So for that, we need to have a really strong intake process that tells us exactly who these people are and tells us who our target is. Are they coming from an institution? Are they on job seekers allowance?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they how are we defining unemployment? So are they looking for work, or are they just not looking for work? What are they doing? So we need a clear idea of who the people are that come in, so then we could track whether they have now come out of poverty or they have found decent work. Are they growing economically? Is that impacting their family? How is that affecting our cities and communities? A good point that was made is tying back to the program. Since we don't have a lot of money, is there a way for us to capitalize on the skills that they already have? So that is probably something we could do, something extra. We need to maximize impact, because if we just show them how to do a CV and to have great communication skills, but we don't show them how to actually use the skills that they already have and how they can maybe bring it up to the 21st century, then they might enter into a job that is not considered decent work or may not help them to grow economically.
Okay.
How are we doing it? Are we using a scoring system? And how many people do we actually need to train to have an impact on these SDGs? So are we running these programs concurrently? Are they one right after the other? Are we taking in small amounts of people, or do we need to take in large amounts of people so that it has an actual impact on the SDGs?
There's only 3 members of staff. Can I ask them all that?
You'll have vision.
I don't know whether you're lucky or unlucky with that bunch. No, but that's really good. So we've kind of started to get into more detail. You know, what is decent work? You know, how are you going to do that? What information? Who is it that you're working with? Demographics and how are you defining and measurement? So we're getting into a little bit more detail. Well, I think I'll give you the opportunity now to kind of share what you thought.
How regular? So same thing, how regular is the program? How often are we supposed to run it? How many people would be in the program at any given time? How are we going to get the money? Are we going to get it in a lump sum? Are we going to get it in tranches? Because that will dictate how we can spend the money. Can we have an income generating element? Because if the investors want a 3% financial return, can we make some money as well too, as part of the program? Can we invest in capital? It says social enterprise, but what are we? Are we non-profit, for-profit? What's our legal structure? What are the criteria for the beneficiaries? So what are we looking for from them? And how do they come to us? Do we put an ad out to attract them to come to us? Or do we already work with some organizations and we ask them, okay, you know if you work in a particular area, you know the people that are there, can you recommend some people to us? Do we have any targets other than the 3% financial return, or is it just that cut and dry? Because sometimes they like to get some other things too. How are we going to define success? What are the demographics of the beneficiaries and what are their skill sets, ambitions, education? So we don't want somebody who has a master's degree, for example, coming into the program if that's not who we're planning on attracting. Okay. So we need to know that information from before and what similar initiatives already exist.
And why do you want to know what similar initiatives already exist?
So that we're either not duplicating, or we can work in partnership, or
cool.
Just know who's around doing some of the things that we've learned from.
Right. Okay. So building on that kind of level of detail, but maybe going a little bit further into how we actually can do that. And last, but by no means least, we did leave you to last. And it's funny because no one in the room came and spoke to you, because the tables are set out like that. And we asked, what information did you need to manage the impact? And no one came and spoke to you. It's a bit odd, isn't it? So this is real life. You know, when we talk about what information we need to manage impact, how often are we coming first of all over here and saying, what information do you need?
You guys won.
So tell us, are your questions different from the others?
What do we want and need in terms of meaning and relevance? Like the meaning of these jobs that you're training us for, the relevance of them to our lives. How is this going to develop my strengths? Like, is it going to help me figure out my particular personal strengths versus just being slotted into some job that I'm going to hate? Will this help me know these things? You know, is there sort of testing and training to know what I'm good at and what I enjoy? How is this going to help me thrive in my life, not just get any old job? We want to know what your track record is, what your success rate is. We want to know how you measure success. You're just going to be happy if you just stick me in a job somewhere and you can cross me off your list.
Yeah. She says yeah. She says yeah.
What support do you offer or help me develop for my responsibilities at home if I'm taking care of children or if I'm taking care of parents? What are your values as a company? What other support services you offer? So referrals, networks for home care, insurance, food, mental health, other health issues. So it could either be affiliations or networks or alliances.
Mm-hmm.
Is there help? Will you continue to help me if I say no to a job? Or if I go to a job and either fail or quit, will you keep helping me? Is there a reliable point of contact that I'll be able to have a relationship with ongoingly, who's going to kind of mentor and coach me? And and I added one at the end. Is there anybody out there who does this better than you?
Right. Okay. So the message here isn't so much that the investors are bad people. Yeah. but the message is definitely clear that the information that's needed seems to be slightly different right through. And so that there poses the inherent challenge that we all face, because there's all these different actors. And you naturally want to get information for your own decision making. Oh, okay, you want to know whether you're getting the financial return, whether they're actually hitting the target of jobs. And for you, that might be enough to make your decisions. But those are not the information that you need, or even what you need as well. So we've talked about how they differ, aggregating detail, kind of low level of detail right down to granular and really quite, specific. You were talking about demographics, exactly, who is it? Have they got degrees already? Did anyone go over and ask them? Very rarely happens. You could have pulled over beneficiary and put them on the board. Imagine that. That would have been good. We've done this exercise like hundreds of times and no one's ever done that. So still waiting, but yeah. Who considered segments or subgroups of the population? It wasn't on your list, like, the individuals, but it's certainly, as we got down here, you were talking about people with different degrees, and you were talking about, because I split you up, I said some of you had childcare issues. So that's perhaps a clear distinction in how do we create value for different subgroups. And what about the role of governance? Were you sort of exploring other options? You had the money. Are there other ways of spending that money to create more impact? Perhaps it's your position to be asking that question. So this slide's about who holds us to account. So who are you accountable to? Who do you have to report to? You got all the money. No one. They report to you. Yeah. Board, who do you report to?
To our investors and to the beneficiaries.
To the beneficiaries?
I think so.
Yeah. So you report there and there. So they've got to report to you. Did you know that?
They also report to us.
But they report to you.
Yes, about their performance.
And who do you report to? You do all of that. There's only 3 of them and you've got all that. But yeah, probably the board and the investor. And then who do you report to? Or, interestingly, yeah, but how do you hold anyone to account? Have you got the way to do that? Can you go somewhere else? Not really. So there's a big accountability gap, really. And I think in theory, it's the board's position to make sure that they are accountable to your needs. They're the ones that should be asking, how can we create more impact for you? And holding the staff to account by saying, are you creating as much value as you can for them? So that is why the board plays a really important role in this. And it's quite crazy that a lot of boards only meet 4 times a year and they have 2 hours. Yeah, so that's the challenge we're working on. So there's low levels of accountability, and that's essentially what we're talking about today. There's loads of reasons why we don't manage impact. It's too expensive, not sure which tool to use, we'll do it next year, or our data isn't good enough. But these are all excuses, really. We need to be managing information if we're to create more impact for people. So we've rushed through that a little bit because of the time. But if we had more time, we'd probably realize that we had similar questions across the board. So we'd be talking about what problem we're trying to solve, what is our proposed solution, we started talking about who experiences the outcomes, what changes are they going to experience, is it jobs, what is it, quality of life, how can we measure these changes, we started getting that there, how do we measure whether someone's had a job or not, how much of each change has happened, or is that, yeah, we're talking about how much of each change is caused by our activities, maybe it's by, another organization that's working in the field. How long do we need to measure these for? I think someone said, is it for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? And which ones are more important? If we're talking about maximize, you've got these other questions in there about subgroups, because we want to create as much value as we can. We need to know, are there sort of distinct groups there that we need to treat differently? So So that's the segmentation element. And the question that no one came up with in this kind of rushed exercise was, what is the importance of these different outcomes? I think we were getting there at kind of like, well, maybe I don't just want a job. Maybe I want something that makes me feel fulfilled or thrived, you know, and is it that outcome that is more important than just getting a job? And that's the kind of question that we need to be asking, like, what is most important for the people you're designing services for? So that's social impact. And social value, it's worth saying, if we think that social impact's about changes people experience in their lives, that's positive changes but also negative changes. It's the intended changes that you wanted to see, but it might be unintended changes as well. Now, we recognize that some of these changes are more important to people than other changes. And so understanding that relative importance is important. And if we can quantify that importance, that's what social value is. So it's explicitly saying that this change is more important than that change. And trying to represent that.
Is that sometimes done in terms of for the investors in a monetized way?
So it can be done using money.
Social impact way. Really.
If you kind of represent the importance of the changes using dollars or pounds or euros, then that allows you to do a social return on investment. Some people really like that. Some people hate that and feel like it's not right to do. But we're relaxed on that to the point where we're saying if you want to monetize, that's fine. But what you really need to do is kind of understand the relative importance. So at the very least, you should be asking people to rank the outcomes that they experience, saying which is most important, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You could then ask them to weight them. So on a scale of 10, how important is it to you? That gives you that information, that data on actually this one is way more important than that one. And then if you want to kind of say, well, this one is worth $500, this one's worth $2,000, that's also cool because that gives you that kind of representation.
Realistically, the money game is a bit of a furphy because a lot of things that are put into money don't show the externality costs that the community, you know, mining companies say we've made a fortune on this mine, you know, look, but then the community is left with the cleanup.
Yeah.
So it might make a big profit for the mine, but the community bear the externality costs.
So,
the shareholders are happy.
so often when you see it monetized, you're exactly right. It looks at the monetary value to the organization, and very rarely does it look at the monetary value to the beneficiary or the individual. There are, however, some ways to do it, which are really cool, really innovative, and can actually engage beneficiaries in understanding. If you were to pay for this, or could you put some monetary value on it, you can do that in a really kind of participatory way, which is quite empowering and quite, well, very useful for an organization. And ultimately, this question about relative value gives us options to choose the best way of spending the money. Because if you're asking the questions and the beneficiaries are telling you that actually it's this outcome that's most important, then maybe with that 200,000 euros investment, you can spend it slightly differently. Okay? So we've got a shared list, hooray. But over the top of that list is two more important questions, which is who answers the questions? Because whilst we might agree on that list of questions, it really has to involve the beneficiaries for it to be meaningful. Because we can all sit in a room and answer those questions, but have you done that stakeholder involvement piece? And the second one is how much detail and rigor is needed. So when you see all those questions, you might think, gosh, that's a lot of information to get. But actually, you can get away with quite low rigor information. And by low rigor, I mean you can just go and ask people, and you might then know, actually, that's good enough information for me to make a decision. In some instances, it might not be good enough, and you might need to put more resources in and get more rigorous data. But the point is, don't let that get in the way of just getting started and actually asking these questions and getting some information. You can break it down like these two questions you've probably done. The problem and the solution is the theory of change. And then typically who changes and how they change is the qual, which we'll talk about after lunch. And then these ones are more quantitatives, like how can we measure that change? Who else contributed to it? And what is the relative importance? That's the quantitative data. And the last one is your analysis based on all that, which is the most important ones. Has anyone heard of the Impact Management Project? Yeah? So it's quite a big thing. I'll talk about it in a minute, but that's these little logos. And what it's, I'll come back to that in a second. So there's a typical workflow which involves a qualitative phase where you're asking what changes for you, who changes, what are your circumstances, those are the demographics. And that should lead to a set of outcomes, okay? So that's the bit that you need to do first, that qualitative bit. Focus group discussions, one-to-one interviews. That's where you really drill down into the demographics and what is it that's changed and perhaps what's most important at that point. Once you've done that bit, you can then go into a quantitative phase where you've got your survey perhaps, your questionnaire, and on these outcomes you can then start asking, well, how much? How do we measure that? How long does it last? How important is it to you? A, B, C, or D? Which one's most important? Would this change have happened anyway? And who else contributed to that change? These are the types of questions that come in then once you've defined the outcomes. And I say it happens at the end, but actually you can do it throughout. Data analysis, segmenting, understanding, are there different pockets of people that have different answers to these questions? And how can we turn that into recommendations for improvement? So that's a slide that I quite enjoy using because it gives people the 10 questions, but in a kind of typical workflow. Just conscious of the time, because I think we should stop for lunch in a second. These are important things to remember. It is not a science, so you're never going to be able to go, this is exactly how much impact we've created. If you get all the universities that you can think of to kind of work on it, they're never going to give you accuracy on this, okay? They're just not. It's not possible to say exactly this amount of impact. So don't let that sort of perfection stand in the way. Just get data that you think is good enough to support your decisions. Oh, yeah, we need enough precision for the decision, which I didn't make up, but it really sticks in my head. And I think I said this earlier, like you're all already doing this. You're all innovating all the time, making decisions. Oh, let's do this, let's do that. So what you just need to do is get some more data, perhaps, to kind of support those decisions. Because I think a lot of the time we use our gut instincts, like I think this is what people want, or I think this is perhaps a better way of doing it. And actually, this whole impact management thing, I don't really, I believe that people are already doing this. I just feel like they just need to perhaps bring in some more data to support those decisions. How often should we do it? Well, I think it should be relentless, so all the time. So one way of looking at accountability is you are accountable to your stakeholders if you are relentlessly innovating, if you're always changing to provide better services for them. That proves accountability. So one thing that we're experimenting with boards and investors is to say, if that's true, do we like that? Then maybe all you need to know is how many times has the staff team changed, iterated, responded to what they've heard? Would that be a really interesting proxy to kind of go, my money's being invested wisely there because I know that they're kind of continuously improving and I've got this table of examples of how they're improving. Okay, right, okay. What does it look like? We can do this, but I'm going to go fairly quickly because there's tons of stuff out there on theories of change. It is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Okay? A lot of people think, oh, I've got a theory of change, that's all I need. We'll come to that. It's all right. Welcome. We're just starting. So, theory of change. What we've got here as well is this cycle the guide that I told you about that will be disseminated. Everything's around this. So you're planning, you're doing, you review, revise, your operations, your impact as well. And so we're in the first quarter. The theory of change happens right at the beginning. It's a planning tool. Ultimately, that's what it is. It's a theory. This is how we're going to create change. And it answers the first two questions on your lovely bookmark, which is what problem are we trying to solve and what is the proposed solution? Okay? What does it look like? It normally starts with your goals. So on a piece of paper, it has your intended outcomes at this side of the paper. It might be your SDGs that you're aiming for, or it might be more defined ones. But a theory of change, when you're creating it, tends to start at this end of the paper and it goes backwards. So you go, these are my goals, and then these are all the things that I need to include in the theory of change. Am I right? I'm getting nods. You're the definitive other theory of change expert in the room, okay? So I'm going to keep coming to you. So you've got your impact goals, and then you've got some outcomes that lead to that. And then you need to know what are the outputs that lead to the outcomes, and what is the activity that leads to outputs and the inputs. Does everyone know what these words, these jargon words are? Hi. So inputs is basically what you need to deliver the activity. I need a room, I need some money, I need some trainers. That's my inputs. The activity is a training course. The outputs are number of people that have completed the training course. The outcomes are the changes in people's lives. And the impact is the long term, or the change that's happened as a result of what you've done. So those kind of jargony words are ones that you will need to be familiar with if you. Yeah, sure. So inputs is what you need to deliver your activities. Often money, time, resources, things. Activity is actually what you're doing to create change. So in this example, I'm saying it's a training course. The activity is a training course, and the outputs tend to be things that you can count very easily, like number of people that came on the training course. The outcomes are less obvious because they're the changes that happen in people's lives, so they're not immediately apparent. That's where you have to kind of do this qualitative exercise, which we'll get into. And the impact goal is kind of all of the outcomes put together, short term, long term, and also how much of it is down to you. All right, I'll share this so you can take, and there's loads of stuff out there on the internet that you can find about theory of change. Here's the employability is the case study we were talking about earlier. You've got the goals there of young people secure employment, and the other outcome goal is that they make informed decisions about their future. So you've got here a kind of theory of change with all the outcomes that lead towards those goals, and then you've got the output there, number of young people attending the program, and the activities is a 6-week employability program. Okay? Simple. Advantages. Can anyone think of the advantage of a theory of change?
It keeps people on a roadmap together.
Yeah.
They will know where we're up to now. It's not so weird.
It's a clear vision. This is how we're going to create change. That's why investors like it. You do need to be able to present that very succinctly to anyone about your organization. Very useful to have. And it does create a framework for some of the data we need to collect for measurement. It's often visual, because it's a diagram, so that helps bring it to life. It helps to refine, doing the theory of change gives the opportunity to involve stakeholders at an early stage. So if you're designing the theory of change, the more you can speak to your beneficiary group to actually understand what those changes are going to be, the more accurate the theory is going to be. One of the main problems with theories of change is people sit in a room on their own and they go, this is what's going to happen, and they don't speak to anyone, and it's their theory. So I suppose a good theory is one that involves people from the start to actually understand what the changes are. Helps to refine the focus, the root problem, and it provides a consensus, like you said, a kind of roadmap, if you like, between the enterprise and the investor. It kind of indicates what success should look like, and it may have targets for delivery. How many outputs are you going to have? Some of the issues to consider is that they're often strategic organizational theories of change, and it doesn't have the level of detail to consider different changes. So you might be like, this is the theory for our whole project, but it doesn't go into the detail of, well, for this stakeholder group, the changes are going to be slightly different. So people often do a theory of change for the investor just about the whole organization, and we're encouraging the board to really ask the staff team to create theories of change for all the different types of stakeholders that you have. accountability, that word again. Have the beneficiaries been involved in creating or informing these theories? Otherwise, it's just you offering a top-down approach on your theory towards how you're creating change. And good levels of accountability will mean that it's constantly changing. It means that you're tweaking it all the time in response to the information you've heard. And a lot of the time, theories of change are created, they're posted on the website, and then they're never touched again for 2, 3, 5 years. So a good organization will refresh that theory of change regularly, going, oh, well, we've seen this, it's actually this change, that change. So yeah, they don't often include unintended outcomes, positive or negative, because you just kind of know this is what we intend to achieve, and that might lack the detail that you need in order to innovate and improve delivery, the gold dust, if you like. Okay, so that was a very quick overview of theory of change. Is it okay if we move on now? Cool. Throughout the rest of the slides, we're going to be talking about this impact management cycle. Yeah, everyone likes a Smurf. And when we get data, we should be going, well, what does this data or information allow us to do? Does it tell us to stop doing what we're doing? Because actually, sometimes information can be there to say, do you know what you're doing is not good. Stop. Or actually, this is great. Maybe you should do more of it. Or, this is interesting. Let's just make it a slight change. So stop, scale, make changes should always be what we ask ourselves when we're receiving information. Okay, I'm going to skip. We talked about that earlier. And we're going to go into all these questions now. The qualitative phase. How's lunch? Okay, all right. We're going to go into this bit then. Pudding. I didn't realise there was pudding involved. We're going to start session 3 then, which is about qualitative data. This is about managing risk and maximising impact. Okay. Come in. It's all right. So we are going to address the impact questions of who changes and what changes, and explore the risks and opportunities that qualitative data brings. And this is a lovely picture of 2 people talking, I think. I'm not sure where it's from. But essentially it's about, we need to talk. There's words that everyone fears. But actually this is exactly what it's about. It's about talking to people, asking who experiences change in their life as a result of you, and what it is that changes for them. So it's not a survey with closed questions. It's about a conversation. Here's the Dalai Lama. Always has good stuff to say. He says, when you talk, you're only repeating what you already know, but if you listen, you may learn something new. Yeah. You can't have a PowerPoint without the Dalai Lama. Now, imagine the Dalai Lama running a focus group or a semi-structured interview. He does that as well. No, it's about talking, it's about listening, and it's about power. We started talking about that earlier. There's those that have power in this world and those that don't. And often the people that we're designing service for don't have very much power to make decisions, and it's about amplifying their voice. So certainly this qualitative data stage is an opportunity to allow those that don't normally get an opportunity to tell us, those with power perhaps, what's important to them, what they've experienced. Because we may have an idea about what's changed based on our lovely theory of change. But until we have that conversation and say openly, what's changed in your life, we don't know the full range of consequences. And actually, this is really important. This can't be over-exaggerated. This is the little bit in the measurement bit where we are opening ourselves up, shifting a bit of power and saying, do you know what, you tell us what's happened and we'll measure that. If you don't do that, what's the risk? Trump. Yes. Yeah. No. People feeling left out and angry. Agreed. And what else might happen if you don't do this qual phase first? Failure. Because right. Yeah, solving the wrong problem, not working on that. So we've talked about why this is important. Oh no, we're talking about who experiences change instead of what. So I'd like to get you working again. Flip the paper over, and you're all going to pretend to be the staff now. So forget the investor role, board role, beneficiary role. You're all, yeah, the staff have now tripled in size. And I want you to, only 2 minutes, just think, who are the people that you need to run the program? Who are the people experiencing change? Big list of people. Who? That's the question we're asking now, okay? The point is, we can very quickly get a long list of stakeholders, people that are affected. And it's a bit of a catch-22 because we then have to decide who we include in our stakeholder involvement in our measurement, but we don't know whether they've experienced change or not. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there where we don't know, do we go and speak to these people? Do we think change? So you've got to make a bit of a judgment at that point. Who stays on your list of people to speak to and who doesn't? And you're going to be confined a little bit with the resources you've got. You probably can't speak to all of those people on day one. So you've then got to make this decision of who probably experiences the most change. Let's start there. And then year on year, you might then roll out. So yeah, your resources dictate this, whether you include or exclude them. Maybe the list is not long enough, actually. Maybe you haven't identified any subgroups. This table over here had got like different subgroups for the staff. So they've rolled it out. So maybe you think that's important. Maybe with the families, you start segmenting them and go, well, this is a family with young children, this is a family with elderly, this is a single parent family, not. So actually, your list of who you involve in your measurement will go up and down. Sometimes you'll go, there's so many people, then you'll refine it, and you'll constantly be changing that, okay? So that's a list that you've got to be comfortable with changes. Sometimes too big, sometimes too little, depending on your resources. So if you decided, I haven't got the resources to involve the beneficiaries, there's a big risk there that you're not going to capture all of the important changes. And that's the balance that we've always got to play. So there's a level of detail that might be more useful at the investor level or the enterprise level. So once we've got this list, is that information that can help us with the decision? Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to what changes. We've talked about why this is important. Giving a voice, amplifying the voice so that we're measuring the right things. The next task I'm going to ask you to do on the other piece of paper, and I've put the clicker down there, is to analyze some qualitative data. Okay? Because when you ask open questions, you get loads of words back, right? It's not neat, it's messy. And the task you've got now is to read this in your pairs, and you've got 10 minutes to analyze.
Thank you.
You all need one. So what I want you to do is in 10 minutes give me 4 or 5 outcomes. Outcomes are changes in people's lives. There's a whole page full of words there, but I want you to be able to tell me 4 or 5 outcomes that people are experiencing. You might also see that there's some segments emerging. Bear that in mind as well. So there's a whole load of stuff in there. We might go on, but I think we'll probably get into a shared list. We all got something similar to that? Cool. And then I also said, so this is where I get to use that picture, because you've got to embrace the messiness. Okay? The words are messy. Okay. you've got to embrace it because it's messy, right? And you're not going to get it perfect, and your words might be slightly different from your words. But I reckon if you'd all had longer or spent time on it, you would have come with a fairly similar list of these are the changes that are happening, and that'll have to do for it'll be good enough. Did anyone find an outcome that was just not relevant? There's one in there which is
Because he's already working for his father. I'm working for my father.
is there someone who
Might as well have not done the course.
is there someone who breaks their arm or breaks their leg or something?
I haven't got to that one. There's one where the boy says, to be honest, with job it doesn't make any difference. I'm working with Dad anyway. That's
So
neutralised.
the point is that there might be a really random, someone might have said something like, yeah, since coming on this course, I fell and broke my leg, and I've been in hospital ever since. So you've got to make a decision, well, do I measure that for everyone? Or is that just a irrelevant, not irrelevant, but yeah. Okay. So yeah, these are the ones that we got from doing this exercise, changing job status. And actually, that's a condition of the program, because remember, the investors over there, they said, well, we want to know how many people get jobs. Okay, so we're always going to measure the job status one. And then we came up with changing income. Some people get more, some people get less. Changing levels of stress. Changing confidence about making decisions about the future. And then changing levels of loneliness. And we've written them not as positive or negative, because in a recognition that all of these outcomes can be both positive and negative. And I think that comes through from it as well. Did anyone identify some sort of segments that were experiencing things differently? Right, that was coming through. Anything else?
People had to travel.
Right. So, do you think those are useful bits of information to bring into data collection?
And losing old friends because they've had to move
Right.
away from their friendships. that they had.
So these outcomes, these experiences are affected by factors like family situation, even location. Can we make decisions now based on all this information? Some? Yeah. If everyone there said, oh, I broke my leg on the course, then you'd be like, hang on a minute, we need to see what's going on this course. If everyone's talking about transport, you could probably make a decision at this point. Do you know what, let's move the location. You could decide, we're not going to accept people on the course anymore who live in rural locations. Do you think that's a good idea? But if you've only got a limited amount of resources, you can't open another branch.
No, you offer money for them to travel.
Right. There you go. I love it. You're coming up with ideas, but the point is you've got change. You can make changes already with that information, okay? And the changes you make has got to be commensurate to the information you've got. Just like the example you gave earlier, like do you just build a new office somewhere else on the basis of it? No, you'd probably want a bit more evidence. Okay, so moving on, how is this different to theory of change? Well, it's very similar because we're looking at what are the outcomes, what's changing for people. But we start at this end and we go, what are the different outcomes? Can be quite messy, right? But it's important to do that because then you see all these different, oh, these are negative ones. Those are unintended. We weren't expecting to tackle isolation, but it turns out we are. Wow, that's good. Let's speak to some other funders and tell them about that. And actually, they might like that and give more funding from. So, yeah, it's important to ask those open questions. How far you go with the outcomes is probably the hardest bit, but you've just got to make a judgment on that. There's a guidance document that I will circulate, which also says like how many people should you involve and how can you avoid biases, some of those issues that we were talking about earlier with Courtney. But remember, what did we say earlier? It's not a science. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. Even from that information, you can start making decisions. Accountability, innovation, gives people a voice, makes them feel empowered, allows you to create services that are valuable to them. So here we go. We've got our case study, and beforehand we just knew that there was these out, and everyone's thinking about SDGs, great. But if you want to manage impact and you want to create better services, you probably need to go a bit more detail to that. And we've got that now. Okay? We've done our qualitative exercise, and we now have these things that we're going to measure. We've identified some potential subgroups of our participants, those with care responsibilities, rural participants, and those with a support network. Did anyone see that in there? There was like some people have got a support network already. Maybe we don't include them in the program, to your point, because actually they're going to get the jobs anyway. So let's make that decision.
Or maybe they're in a gang.
Maybe they're in a gang. Exactly. You just don't know. But the important thing is we can start to make decisions about how we can create more impact. So we've identified 5 outcomes that are relevant. That means we think they're relevant to the program. But we don't know how significant they are. We don't know, out of these ones, which one is most important, do we? We don't know if everybody's income is going down. We don't know if everybody's optimism for the future is going up. We don't know if everyone's stressful. What are the levels? So although we've defined that, the next questions are about how much changes, how can we measure that, how long do we need, and the importance, okay? So I'm racing through this because I want to get you all experts by the end of it, all right? So now we're going to address impact questions 6 to 9. Check out your bookmark. So it's about how much changes, the importance of them, and so forth. Now this will probably happen once you've started your activities. So up there was a theory of change where we're just planning. Now we're actually delivering our service, our activities. We need to start collecting data on how much of each change has happened. So those changes there, how much of it is happening, or maybe if we're forecasting, how much do we think is going to happen? How much of each change is caused by us? I think you made the point earlier, there might be other people working in this area of job creation. So actually, if 50 people got jobs, let's ask those 50 people whether they got the job because of us or whether they got the job because of someone else. Because why is that important? Why do we want to know that?
Because we can then tell our investors.
We can tell our investors, but what?
We know it's working as well.
Yeah, but what if we find out that half of them or all of them are not getting the job because of us? Yeah. We can stop. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So here's a little exercise. I'm going to ask you. This exercise shows you why we need some quantitative data to go on with our qual. There's project A and project B, and you're going to tell me which one you want to invest in. So, if we know that in project A, 30 people get jobs, and in project B, 10 people, who's going to invest in project B? Really? And who's going to invest in project A?
I won't say yes or no because I don't know.
Well, just on that information, that's all.
Then it's just A.
So you wouldn't, okay.
Well, we don't just only say
No. They both cost the same. Right? Yeah, okay. They both cost the same. All we know, the only information is that 30 got jobs on project A and 10 on project B. So who's going to vote? Who's going to invest in project A? Yeah, we all are. If we know how much change, so the people that got the jobs, project A was 10 hours a week, project B was 35 hours. Project A?
I don't understand. They work 10 hours?
Yeah, they got a job, but it's only 10 hours a week. But in project B, they've got 35 hours a week.
unless they're accountants, it doesn't make any sense.
So who likes project B now? Yeah. Okay, so you can So this one here is how much is down to us. So in project A, most of them were previously short-term unemployed. Most of them were previously long-term unemployed. So project B works with people that have not had a job for ages versus project A, people that have had jobs quite recently. Project A or project B? Okay. Okay, so more data. How much change down to us? So on project A, 60% would have got jobs without us. On project B, only 10% would have got jobs. So project A, project B. How long do the changes last for? So in project A, 70% of them have got jobs after a year, but in project B, only 20% have still got a job. Project A or project B? And the last one is the relative importance of the value, perhaps, is expressed through the salary. Project A or project B? Project A? Project B? Cool. So there's no real right or wrong answers, but that exercise just shows that you can, the more data you've got in answer to all of those questions, the more it's going to influence your decision. And I can't remember who said it, but someone said, well, maybe they want 10 hours a week. In which, yeah. Yeah. So if we're involving stakeholders and asking them to tell us, well, what is it that you want? And we know that actually all of them want part-time work because they've got children at home and they want to balance that kind of childcare, then actually 10 hours per week, we know that's more valuable than that. We'll do more of that. Okay? When should we start? So when should we start collecting data? At the beginning. Yeah. Because if we're trying to measure an amount of change, it's very hard to kind of do that retrospectively. So where possible, if you can do a baseline form, anyone heard of that? That's a good idea. And if you've got an idea of what the outcomes are going to be for the people on this program, maybe you can introduce this when they start the training course. And this baseline form will have bits of information there that we think are important, like family situation, location, so we know where they live, roughly. This is information that you may already have, but you're kind of beginning to think this is going to be important now. And then with the outcomes, like loneliness, stress, you can ask them to tell you, how stressed are you at the moment? On a scale of 1 to 10. Is that very scientific?
No, but it's easy for people to get their head around.
And would it be good enough to help you make some decisions?
Yes.
Yeah. Might as well start there. So, I think we've got time for this. I'm going to give you a bit of time, and I want you to design a survey based on the outcomes, all right? So how might you measure these outcomes? And for each outcome, so forget that one. That table over there, you're going to measure confidence to make decisions. You're going to measure income. You're going to do loneliness, and you're going to do stress. Okay? So that you've each got your outcome, and how would you collect information about the amount of change, how much? I'll get the symbols out again. Thank you. Thanks, Courtney. Let's have an example then. Could you all measure the amount of change? So, confidence to make decisions. How did you measure the amount of change?
We asked questions. Compared to your peers, do you feel less or more confident? And then it was like they have to choose. Then on a scale from 1 to 10, how anxious scale once you're done.
Right.
And then do you feel that you can make a decision with, and then there was little information, medium, and a lot of information?
Okay, so 3 different ways to measure the amount of confidence people have. That's great. Next table, what did you have? Income. How do you measure the amount of income?
How much were you earning before? How much are you earning now?
Okay, that's the easy one. Well done. I'll come back to you for another. So we were looking at loneliness over here.
Yeah.
Are you more or less lonely today than when you started the program?
Yes, no.
Or from a scale of 1 and 10.
Okay. So actually, and I'll go. What was your? Could you measure the amount of stress?
How stressed was you before course 1 to 10? How much stress are you now 1 to 10? How much stress was caused by the course?
Yeah. So getting into how much of it was caused by us. So whatever you were measuring, you could say, was that down to us, or was it something else? And that's useful. Okay. Anyone tackle this one, which is what is the relative importance of each outcome?
Economically and psychologically. If you're more economically stable, you have money, and are you happier? Are you less stressful?
Yeah, but this one is actually trying to establish, of all these outcomes, which one is most important. As maybe you didn't get to that because you were focusing on measuring your individual ones, and that one is actually asking the person, of all these outcomes, which one is most important?
Doesn't it come to the person answering the question?
Absolutely, yeah. So you're going to get... We're looking for patterns, which takes us on nicely to the next bit, because you've designed these surveys, you've then sent them out to 100 people that have been on your course, and what are you going to get back?
Well, this little of that, all these outliers and nothing.
Well, remember when we analysed qualitative? So now it's time to analyse quant. Okay, that means looking at all the numbers. So you've got all these questions that you designed, and you've then got to look at some insights. So I'm going to scare you, but then also make it easier for you. So here is a snapshot of what the spreadsheet might look like. Spreadsheet. Oh, come on. Who doesn't like spreadsheets? Yes, I am in the right room. Hands up who likes spreadsheets. That's a good 60% of the room. Okay. Yeah. So we're looking at quant. So this is what, if you collect all of the data of all those 10 questions, that's 50 different people. These are all the questions. That's 50 different people, all the data. It's really small. You're not going to be able to read it. I'll actually send you the spreadsheet if you want. You can play around with it for hours. If you're a real geek like me, you get the filters, you get the pivot tables. You go wild. Pivot tables. But this is actually the insight. So this is the answers, okay? So what you would do with a spreadsheet is look for data insights, okay? And here I've pulled them out for you. 31%, and what I want you to do in 5 minutes is come up with some ideas to change the program based on the data, okay? Data insight number 1, 31%, so 31 participants who were rural, only 5 completed the course. I think you said that earlier. Only so many were actually completing the course. So what should the program do to maximize impact? Yeah. So you could pay for their travel, is that what you mean? Yeah. Or run one near them. So you alter the course location, provide free travel, or do not let rural people attend the course. I think that's actually okay to do that, because otherwise, yeah. And maybe next year when you've got more money, you do that. What about the insight? 5 female participants had care responsibilities, secured employment, experienced an increase in stress. Provide extra support, advise of the risks. That was kind of, how to deal with stress. only help participants into jobs that will be flexible enough to allow care to continue. So that's about what jobs it is. Consider partnering with a care agency. So loads of ideas. You get the picture, right? And then you can, with the more data you get and the more clear it will become, the personas. Have you heard of that phrase, a persona? Yeah, you're designing, you're like, a lot of market research uses that term. You know, we've got this customer persona. Young kids who like trainers, you know, that's a persona. Really bad persona, okay? That was just the first one that came into my head. Then you can take in, you know, if we had more time, we could talk about options appraisal, so you can actually add up. You see on the spreadsheet, you've got the total project weighting based on all of the data. And then you can do options if you do alter the location versus free travel and look at the costs. I'm into the last 5 minutes now, so I'm going to skip quite a bit, but it's important to have targets. If you're starting collecting this type of information, you can set targets and see whether you're on track. Culture. Right, so this is about getting the board involved, the governance. It comes from the board, it comes from the chief exec or whoever. This is the face you normally get from other people in the organization. Right. Yeah, financial director. That's exactly what that one is. This one, this is about being brave, taking a risk, but managing the risk, you see? Okay? Managing the risk. So we look at the systems and processes you have for collecting all of this. We've got a self-assessment tool, which is it's free. You just take a load of questions and it gives you a kind of steer on how well you're doing.
Can we do that on your website?
Yeah, I'll send these links as well through to you. We've got this certificate that we've been developing. There is a fee for this, but it kind of gives you a pathway to follow as an organization to show that you're committing to these systems, implementing, and then level 3 you get when you can actually prove that you've used the data to make better decisions. So we think that's a really good way to start embedding this thinking. Yeah, responsiveness. So this is something I think everyone should start doing, is keeping a table, very simple, data insight, then how we could respond and whether it was implemented. And I think you could all do that now because you've all got the word data is a bit weird, but you're all collecting some information, you've got some insight. It could be as simple as we spoke to 2 people this morning in the lift and they said that they don't like the location, right? So we could move locations, but we've not implemented it yet because we only spoke to 2 people and it's in the lift, okay? So my sort of, I don't want to say dream, but what I'd like to do is get organizations doing this, right? And then presenting these kind of tables of recommendations or ways that they've changed their program. If you take that to an investor or a funder, I've got a theory, and I'm working with a few investors to pilot it, that they're actually going to love that. They're going to really appreciate that you're being honest about the data you're collecting, and not only the data collected, but what you're doing with the data. So you've collected it, and you've actually come up with ideas on how to improve your service, your product. And to me, if I was an investor investing my own money, that would be something I'd be looking forward to reading. I'd be like, let's see how they're engaging with their stakeholders and how they're actually making decisions. We've all worked in organizations where collecting data has been a chore. Oh no, I don't want to do that form again. But if you made it exciting as a kind of like as a team, right, this month, guys, what have you got in terms of data? Have you got any ideas? Okay, should we do some of these? And the ones that you do, let's shout about and go, yeah, we're actually changing the way we do it because we're improving it. So it's all about managing risk as well. So there's lots of risk involved here when we're delivering services, and the risk is that we're not creating as much impact as we can with the resources. And sort of this whole training today has been about managing that risk. And so the more of those 10 questions that you're able to answer, the better you're managing the risk. So my conclusions, if I may, again, going over what we've been saying throughout, don't worry about perfection. This is a journey. Stop trying to prove. Remember what I said, you'll never prove the amount of impact, but try and get the data you need to improve. And that's a lot easier, actually. Use any data that you can, even low rigor, sort of what you don't think is very scientific. It's still better than nothing. It can help you with lots of decisions, as we've demonstrated today. Involve stakeholders. On the other side of your bookmark, principle number 1 is involve stakeholders. So throughout this whole exercise of collecting data, wherever you can empower beneficiaries or other stakeholders to answer those questions, that's when you're going to get the useful information. Because remember, if we like these questions, but we just do it, we answer the questions ourselves without involving those that we're trying to help, it's probably not going to give us the useful information we need. Next steps. So if I had like a few top tips for you, get your board on board. If you have a kind of governance structure or you have senior people in your organization, maybe it's you, but having them support you is going to help cascade that throughout the organization. Admittedly, I know you might be working in small micro ones, but it really does start at the top. I would focus on creating systems and processes around these 10 questions. This is all the work that we're doing. There's consistency around these 10 questions. Wherever you look now with impact, these are the ones that need to be answered. So start building up these systems that work around these questions. And the last one was start cataloging those changes, those iterations. That last table that I showed you, if you can start doing that now, that's a really powerful resource for you to have. And then, I mean, it's quite satisfying. Imagine at the end of the year looking at that table going, wow, look at all the changes we've made to our program, because you're all doing it. It's not a tool you need. That's the big thing. Everyone says, give me the tool to measure the impact. There isn't really a tool. It's a framework. It's a framework for maximizing value and being more accountable to those that you're there to serve. 7 principles, there's a guide. We'll circulate all of this. We'll provide you with links. And on that note, I'm going to have to run to get a train. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.